もしやコスモでは。
Cosmo needs me free.
Cosmo AP Luxury Sports.
Welcome to episode 34 of my 76 Mazda Cosmo restoration. This time I'm going to be installing the air-to-water intercooler system. Here's what I'm using to build the system. First, we have the actual air-to-water intercooler itself, which is a 9-inch by 3.5-inch by 3-inch core, an 11-inch by 13-inch heat exchanger, a Bosch Cobra, that's the same pump as used in the Mustang Cobra, water pump, a bunch of silicone couplers, some silicone hose, and of course some bits of aluminum piping to connect it all together. I'm still debating a little bit as to where I'm going to position this thing. Currently looking at about here, or possibly somewhere in this area. But regardless, the stock FD throttle body inlet points in completely the opposite direction. It's made of nasty plastic, doesn't even fit. So, gonna have to make a new one. That's the beginning of what will become the throttle body flange. Because the throttle body is such a weird little shape, you know, it's just going to take as much effort to draw it out in CAD and make a paper template as it is to just bolt the thing to the throttle body and trace it out. Now we'll just scribe a line around the throttle body. I'm not going to cut the flange out to this exact shape. This is just going to give me a general idea of how the inside needs to be cut out. I made this template to locate the holes just by photocopying the throttle body. Now I will just punch the holes so I can drill them out with a hole saw. Gotta say, that might be the best flange I've ever made.
I've made a bunch of these before, so based on prior experience, I started by cutting some pieces of 2.5-inch tubing at a 45-degree angle.
A little bit of trimming on the bandsaw, so now they fit beside one another. Just one quick tack on the top to hold them in place. Just a wide-ass guess, but I think about there is where I need to cut this. like I'll need to cut here and on the other side there. I'm going to start tack welding this together, so before I do that, I am bolting it to a thick plate so that I can try to avoid warping the crap out of it. Just toss a few tacks on here to hold everything in place. A very carefully positioned piece of 2.5-inch tubing allows me to trace where I need to cut. Okay, time to circumcise this thing. The tip has been nipped. I have decided that the intercooler is going to sit about here, as close to the power steering pump as I can get it. So what I need is a 90-degree and then a little bit of a straight section to meet the throttle body adapter. Looks like about 4 inches. That actually looks pretty good. If I can manage not to knock it all down. That's about where I need to cut that. Oh, this is pretty sketchy. Safety. This is not how one should use a bandsaw. I have the camera on just in case there's a terrible accident and I need something to tell the insurance company. Or rather not tell the insurance company. That's not too bad. I can start tacking this thing together. Right there. And yes, it clears the master cylinder. Glad I checked, because this has to rotate up a little bit because the intercooler hits the coil. At this point I can weld this thing up, but first clean the aluminum. Not bad. My fab was a little sloppy and I left this gap. That's going to be fun to fill. TIG welding is not for filling gaps. Now we'll just run a bead over it to make it look a bit pretty. I also welded a little bit of tubing on the elbow for more clamping surface. Just gotta grind the weld down flat. Just need to run a weld bead along the edge to form a lip for the hose to clamp to. Okay, all welded and cooled down, so off of the backing plate and back on the car. Oops, almost forgot to smooth the inside out a little. I guess let's hope that the intercooler still fits. Doesn't seem too bad. Just gonna have to hold that in place with something. Works. No. Trimmed, but that looks to be on the right track. I mounted an FD alternator just to make sure that I'm not plumbing where the alternator should be. This is roughly where the pipe is going to end up. Unfortunately, it's not really the most elegant way to run it, but I'm just severely limited by the placement of stuff. So I got to trim this, and make a transition from 2" to 2.5" to meet up with the intercooler. For the better part of an hour, I've been holding various bits of pipe up to figure how I'm going to route this intercooler tubing. This is the easiest way, but it looks just terrible. I think what I'm going to do is use a few more bends, but if I reduce the height of this tubing to actually be level with the intercooler, it looks just a whole ton better. And I've spent damn near an hour trying to figure out how to run this tubing. The straightest possible approach is also the ugliest possible approach. So, I think what I'm actually going to do is use 2 of these 45-degree pieces, which when cut at the appropriate angle fit almost perfectly. I've just cut a slit down this 2.5" tubing, and I think that if I fold in just one side with the vise, I can create a transition from 2" to 2.5", making this kind of cone shaped. It took a little bit of back and forth cutting with the Dremel to create enough of a relief to be able to fold this over, but it's almost there. Just need ever so slightly more material to be removed. Now everything just needs a little bit of trimming. That's not too bad. I think I can tack it together now. Don't want to melt the silicone. I would love to get a few more tacks in that spot, but there just isn't enough clearance. So what I'm going to do now is very, very carefully remove this, get it over to the bench for final welding. half later, all welded up. Looks like I've created a hell of a pipe. I just need something to smoke. Oh, the pipe is all done, but aesthetically, it's kind of like a last call fat check. You know, functional for the purpose, but not necessarily the first thing I'd be proud to show off in the engine bay. Speaking of things that blow, time to mount the blow-off valve. And I think right about there is where I like it. Really sucks this won't fit in the drill press. Actually, that really wasn't bad at all. A bit of an annoying gap to fill right there. And that will become a bung for the air temp sensor. Still doesn't fit in the drill press. Now all I have to do is tap it out to 3/8 NPT to fit the sensor. Incidentally, this bung is made of the plug that I hole sawed out of the middle intake manifold in episode 23, I think. Just grab a 3/8 NPT fitting as a test. Yep. Looks pretty good. I wouldn't say that was my best thread tapping, but the sensor fits. Building the water tank now, and well, you've already seen me build a box in episode 32 when I built the air box. So I think what we're going to do is just kind of plow through this quickly, and if you really are curious to see the steps it takes to build an aluminum box, go back to episode 32. The water tank measures 7 inches by 9 inches by 5 inches, holding about 5 liters, and it'll fit right where the battery used to. Ugly. Done. An hour and a half of welding, an inch at a time. Now I will just mark an outline so that I will know roughly where to drill mounting holes. I can mark the locations of the mounts from below. The aluminum that I'm using for the mounts and to reinforce the bottom a little bit is way too thin to drill and tap, so just use some nut certs to add some mounting threads. Got one side welded on, a little bit messily, I have to admit, so just clamp the other one down and weld it in place. Two mounts welded. Yep, got it. -10 AN weld bungs will allow the fittings for the water lines to connect. One of them will go right there, and then the feed to the pump I think will tuck about down here. bungs are welded, and I added another one here for a temperature sensor. God, it's hot. I welded on another bung, which I'm now tapping to 3/8 inch NPT. This is for another GM style temperature sensor, just like the coolant temp sensor on the engine. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm very curious as to what the temperature of the water in this tank is going to end up as. So I'll just connect it to one of the spare analog inputs on the Megasquirt for data logging. Oh, also, if the intercooler water temperature is too high, I can set the Megasquirt to turn on the main cooling fan to draw some air through the heat exchanger. Well, with all the bungs and nipples welded on, we can install the water tank. I made these little spacers which raise the front just a little bit because I didn't notice when I was fabricating this, but this part of the car slopes down. So that just takes up the extra slack. Just finding the center of the front of this opening, because the next thing to mount is the heat exchanger to cool the water. That's about it right there. Mounting this should be about as easy as mounting a teenage girl after a One Direction concert. Just some brackets made of angle iron. This stamping line makes the flange about 3/4 of an inch. So that seems like a handy width to cut my bracket. Looks about right to me. Just welded some bolts to the bracket to make them a crap ton easier to install onto the heat exchanger. And they actually fit, so time to take it over to the car and weld it in place. Thankfully, because I haven't done any sheet metal welding lately, I almost totally forgot the weld primer. So with the weld primer dry, we can just center this in the opening. I've already made a center mark. And temporarily clamp it in place. For the record, I have actually checked that this heat exchanger fits under the nose of the car. Tons of room. It's like a hot dog in a hallway. The bottom brackets are really exactly the same as the top brackets. I just cut this part of the flange a little bit shorter. So we'll just pull the heat exchanger off and weld these brackets to the chassis. If you're counting, that is 4 heat exchangers on the front of this car. Radiator, AC condenser, oil cooler, and finally this thing. With the major components installed, it seems like a good time to end this episode. Next time, we're going to complete the water tailer intercooler installation by mounting the pump, plumbing the system, and wiring it up.